Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very, very good to be here. Let me start saying that, the first time I came to Washington, D.C. 30 years ago, when I was a kid, in one of my vacations, I came to see an uncle that was living here. And it was up to me to get to know this fantastic city. There was no internet, so I couldn't Google anything. So I bought a tourist guide. And the very first attraction in my list was the Natural History Museum. So I just went there using the metro for the first time in my life. I am from a very small town in Bolivia, in South America. And I was amazed. Just the atrium, that big elephant that I think is still there. Fantastic. And all the exhibitions. I became in love with science and conservation. The very next day, the next item in my very long to-do list was the National Air and Space Museum. And I discovered another passion that I had was engineering, how to solve really tough problems. And here I am, 30 years later, and going to present and talk about conservation, about science and engineering, and certainly positive partnerships. This very beautiful picture here is a penguin, a Humboldt penguin, listed by IUCN as vulnerable because the loss of their habitat. Really shy animals, but they are very happy. Look at the face, she's smiling. We also have this kind of animals, and the picture, I don't know why it's not making justice, but it's a really nice fish. It's called tramboyo in Peru. Really intense eyes, and although not listed in IUCN, basically individuals this size are not common anymore. This is a nice picture of a seabird. It's the Inca tern. Have you seen the power of his eyes, beak, and really nice mustache? Lovely animal, but guess what? It's the party pooper. We have more than 10,000 of these individuals, and they poo everywhere. So it's quite an engineering problem, and we are working with scientists to try to figure out what to do in our marine facilities. Do you guys remember Flipper? Well, this is the South American cousin of Flipper. It's not Flipper, but he's happy too. They play around our facilities in groups of 10, 20. It's really nice to see these nice animals out there. And you may think, okay, this is Peru, and you have really remote islands in the south of the Pacific. You may think that these pictures were taken in Islas Ballestas, near the Paracas Reserve, where all these animals are certainly there. But no, the pictures that I just showed to you were taken here, in our marine facilities. This is Peru LNG, the project I work for. It basically has three components: a natural gas pipeline that crosses the Andes to the coast. Actually, we have the Guinness record of the highest natural gas pipeline in the world. Then we go to Melchorita, that's the name of our plant, located 160 kilometers south of Lima, which is basically a gigantic fridge. Basically, gradually, it turns down the temperature of gas until a point that it becomes liquid. And once liquid, through the marine facilities, we load large LNG ships, LNG vessels. So the main message here, the vision that we had, was how to implement such a large project trying to really taking care of the environment. Well, mitigation hierarchy, that's something simple to do it, looks simple. And it's composed of four main steps. The main step is avoidance, where you really try to avoid the impact. The second one is minimization. If you cannot avoid the impact, then you have to do something about it to try to minimize the impact. The third one is restoration, try to recover what you lost in terms of biodiversity, in terms of habitats. And the fourth one is compensation or additional conservation actions. This picture is before the project. So you can see here This is the project, but the spot that was selected, this is just before construction, was selected after a very careful analysis of different alternatives. 4 sites were thoroughly assessed by a group of people from different backgrounds, from engineering, biology, science, to try to see where can we locate this project in order to minimize, to avoid the impact. And yes, this site was selected for 2 main reasons. First, the biodiversity value of this area of the marine environment was very low. And second, it had a cliff. And in Peru, we have earthquakes, so we have tsunamis. And this cliff provided us with some natural protection against tsunamis. So this picture, at least for us, it represents avoidance. Then minimization. Building a large infrastructure project is really interesting. And you can really harm the environment during construction. So if you follow the mitigation hierarchy and you have inserted in the engineering team, you have a team of biologists, people from conservation, from some different backgrounds. You know, if they work together, there are always ways to do the things like this, building a trestle, trying to minimize the impact. Maybe you can see that, you know, is as transparent as possible, the trestle, in terms of the transport of marine sediments, in terms of the waves, currents, and marine life can move from one side to the other. When we built the breakwater, it's an 800 long meter breakwater, 2 kilometers offshore. All those minimization plans were tested. Anything that we could do could really cause something bad for the environment. But you know, it paid off. All that thought was a direct hit. You can see in the picture. We were even still building it, and pelicans and incoterms and many other seabirds started to populate the structure. It was an amazing, amazing discovery. It became a trendy neighborhood for seabirds. And then this is operations, a picture for operations. And you know what? Yes, certainly the main impacts of a project are during construction. It's very intrusive. You hit hard on the environmental components, and then you have operations. The difference is that in operations, you are operating a project for 30, 40, 50 years. So you better think what you do in order to keep that concept of the mitigation hierarchy live within all your management plans. But we had the question of how do we know that this mitigation hierarchy is working? How can we know that we are really minimizing the impacts, that we are really avoiding or restoring? That's when we have a really interesting partnership with the Smithsonian. We approached them, we explained the problem that we were facing, and they certainly wanted to help us. We entered into a collaboration with them back in 2008 during construction days for a 3-year period. And you know what? The collaboration is still ongoing. It's fantastic. They basically design our monitoring program. The monitoring is so vital because it provides you precisely that, the vital signs of the marine environment or of all the habitats that we cross with our gas pipeline. They provide us with the right information, either good or bad, and with that, we engineers, we can really take those recommendations on board, tweak our management plans, adapt our minimization methods, and make them work. In this picture, you can see people from the Smithsonian team, technicians, they are collecting samples from bentos. They also help us with the marine monitoring regarding fish, regarding seabirds. And what is interesting is that we added a key component to it, which is stakeholder engagement. Nowadays, it is absolutely impossible to do a large project like this without a very robust and sound stakeholder engagement strategy. So, as part of the marine monitoring program, we included a participatory component, which is literally putting in the same boat people from fishermen, people from the surrounding communities, from NGOs, from universities, even from the governmental agencies, because there is nothing to hide. The more transparent the monitoring program is, the better for everybody. And that's the real value of having a partnership like that. I have taken you through a few slides here regarding the story, how we build it, how are we operating, and how are we monitoring it. We now have a colony of 600 penguins, Humboldt penguins, in that breakwater. 600 penguins and a population that is still growing. It's fantastic. And the partnership that we have is basically helping us to understand what can we do and what we shouldn't do in order to really take care of those penguins that are in the core of our marine operations. Finally, this picture represents science, represents conservation and engineering. It's a picture of a penguin nesting in our marine breakwater. It's a picture of the future. So the mitigation hierarchy never stops. And a partnership with an independent and scientific-based organization should accompany the process. Because then again, everybody's looking for sustainable development. Thank you very much.